Okay, good morning. We're on Menachos 22a, third line from the top. So earlier the Gemara said that the wood for personal karbanos comes from the public or from the treasury of the Beis Hamikdash. So the eitzim d'pshita l'tana d'mishel tzibor. Where do we get that from? The idea that wood that the Brisa had just stated that it comes from public funds. Minon, where do you get that from? Tanya of a Brisa Yachol Haomer Harei Alayola. Could be you might have thought that person says I'm going to bring an ola. Yavi eitzim mitoch beso. He has to bring his own wood as well. Kederach shemevi nechasi mitoch beso, nesachi mitoch beso. Just like he brings the other auxiliary parts of the carbon, like the nesachim, the wine and the mincha. So Talmud Lomar, that's not the case. It links the wood to the fire to the mizbeach. Ma mizbeach mishal tzibur, just as the mizbeach, the altar itself, was built from the funds from public funds. Afeitzim v'yesh mishal tzibur. So the fire, well, fire isn't really a tangible thing, but the fire produced by the wood and the wood itself also comes from public funds. It's linked to the mizbeach. Do Rebbe Lazar Bar Shimon. That's the Rebbe Lazar's version.
But who's the public? These individual people have contributed to it. Maybe not this day, but maybe a week ago he contributed with his donation, right? So it's
Yeah,
essentially comes from him, but maybe he gives 3 cents instead of $400. I mean, but whatever it is.
right. But the question is who writes the check to the wood supplier? Is it the
Uh,
person who brings the ola, or does he bring his own wood, or is it the Beis Hamikdash itself using the public funds, which, as you say, came from a variety from everybody? Who writes the check for the
yeah.
wood? Um, and Rabbi Lazar ben Shamu Omer, this other Rabbi Lazar says same thing but different source. Mami's be'ach shelo nishtamish bo hedyot. So actually, it's the same source, but it's a different derivation, different logic. Just as the mizbeach is only has only been used for hekdesh, but not by individuals for private use. So the wood also comes from it can't have been used or owned, let's say, by a private person. Now, so what's the difference? I mean, you're getting it from the same pasuk, from the linking of mizbeach to the wood. So what's the difference if you say it's because just like the mizbeach, which is the mizbeach, which itself was built from public funds, or if you say just like the mizbeach, which has never belonged to an individual. What's the difference between those two views? What about new wood? Okay, or it doesn't have to be new wood. So according to the second view, that can have never it could never have been used for ale. Let's say I bought the wood and I used it to, I don't know, to build a shed, and then I took apart the shed, and then the can that wood be used by the mizbeach? Let's say can the mikdash buy that wood? Well, I've used it already, right? So according to Rabbi Lazar ben Shemua, no, it has to be um, it has to be wood that was never used by anybody else. Um, so the Gemara says, wait a minute, but TK low, is that the case? Like you can't use wood that's been previously owned, previously used by somebody. Vaksiv, Vayamar Ravnel David. This is the passage in Shmuel where Aravna, who's don't he is supporting the building of the David's um, not Beis Hamikdash, but like the Mishkan that was going to be built there. So Ravna said to David, "Yikach v'yal Adoni Hamelech hatov be'anav. Take whatever you want. Re'eh habakar la'olav v'hamorgim uchlei habakar la'etzim. I'm giving you cattle for sacrifices, and I'm giving you klei habakar, the cattle equipment for to use for wood. So." Um, so David Melech is buying, sorry, not the Mishkan, but he's buying the site of the Beis Hamikdash, um, and Aravna is saying, and also, take my wood as well to use in your Beis Hamikdash. So this is old wood, was used by a private individual. So Gemara says, "Hachanam b'chadete." Um, Ravna's donation, he hadn't used them yet. He had brand new cattle implements, yokes or whatever, and that wood had never been used yet, and so it was still eligible for being used on the mizbeach, so even according to Rav Elazar ber Shavua.
Does this
Um,
only apply to the Beit HaMikdash in Shiloh and the people that their own private bamot? They could use presumably their own wood, right?
Private bama, I would imagine so, yeah, because the mizbeach itself in that case was private. So yeah, that makes
But
sense.
but the Mishkan in Shiloh or the
Mm,
communal places where there were still communal uh,
yeah,
uh, bamot, right? Where we learned that earlier. Could they
right.
use their own? I mean, just does this apply only? This ruling apply only to the Beit HaMikdash itself,
Good
or other?
question. I don't see any reason offhand to think that it would not apply to the Mishkan. So if the carbon seaboard, I mean, you couldn't bring a carbon seaboard on a private bama. Oh no, wait, no, sorry, we're talking about private ola, a private ola that you bring to the public mizbeach. Um, so what would be the rule in the Mishkan? I don't see any reason to distinguish between the Mishkan and the Beis Hamikdash unless you can think of something.
I don't know.
I don't know either. So I'm going to assume yes, that it's the same. Now, by the way, the Gemara says my margim. The pasuk referred to Klei Habachar and margim. What is that? Amar Ula mita shel turbal. It's a kind of bed, a mita of turbal. My mita shel turbal. The Gemara wants to know what is that. Amar Ula Iza de Kurkasa. It's a weight that looks like a goat. The dashuba dashai. So that you use to for threshing grain. So I don't know exactly what this means, but like, or what um I mean, I don't know I don't know much about threshing. So, but this mori game that the pasuk refers to was a wooden thing that was donated by Aravna to use, I guess, for firewood. Amar Yosef, my
Rashi says the word kurkasa nasar gadol melo
Nesser
yitedod,
Gadol, a big plank of wood, Malaya Tedot, full
or
of
pegs.
pegs, yeah, or spikes or something. Um, Somehow, I don't know, you use that for threshing. Don't ask me how. Amar Yosef Mikra, and how do you know what's the pasuk that tells you what morigim is? Hine samtich lemorag charutz chadash bal pipios tadush harim. I've made you a new sharp morag, and you can thresh in the mountains with them. So or you can thresh mountains with them and grind them up. So the morag is a threshing tool. Um, okay. All right. Next Mishnah. Nisariv. So now we're going to talk about things that are mixed. Two things that are mixed together. Are they still valid? If they're so, basically, if you have two things that are the same that are mixed together, then the mixture can still be used, presumably, right? So the Gemara will get into the Mishnah. The Gemara will get into the details of that. So, Nisarif kumtza bekometz chaverta. If you have the komets of a mincha and gets mixed up with the komets of another mincha, the komets is what you scoop out, what the kohen scoops out from the flour to burn on the mizbeach. So if two minchas got mixed together, the komets got mixed together, but or b'minchas kohanim, or a regular mincha got mixed up with a mincha of a kohen. B'minchas kohen Mashiach, or the mincha of a kohen gadol, b'minchas nesachim, or a mincha of uh, of nesachim. That's the mincha that comes along with any other carbon. If any of these got mixed up with a person's, standard mincha kshera, the you can still put that mixture on the mizbeach. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, minchas kohen Mashiach, minchas nesachim pesula. If the comments of a regular mincha got mixed up with the mincha of the kohen gadol or minchas nesachim, then you can't put it on the mizbeach. Shazu b'li lasa abba, v'zu b'li lasa raka, because they are different. They're different in how much, how thick the mixture is of the flour and the oil. The hein bolos zub mizu, and they absorb from one another. So, in other words, the one that's thicker will absorb oil from the one that's thinner, and then they're separate. Um, they have separate rules, and so the one gets messed up by the other, and you can no longer put it on the mizbeach. It's not awesome. We have a Mishnah. Dam shenisar b'mayim. If you have blood that's supposed to go through zrika, that's supposed to go on the mizbeach, that got mixed it with water, it got diluted basically by water. Dam basar dam kasher. If it still looks like blood, then it's fine. Nisar b'yayin, but if it gets mixed with wine, roin also ki'ilu humayim. We had this in Zvachim, I think. So what's the difference between being diluted with water and wine, right? If you dilute blood with water, so at some point the redness, is diminished, right? It looks less like blood. But if you mix wine and blood, they're both more or less the same color. Then you could pour in, 90% wine and 10% blood. It would still look like blood. So what do you do with blood that gets mixed with wine? Well, you figure if the wine that I had mixed in were water, would the blood be too diluted? So it wouldn't look like blood anymore. So rowing so kilumime, you evaluate as if the wine were water, and then you determine with that amount of water, would this still look like blood? If yes, then it's still kosher, and if not, then it's not kosher for the mizbeach. Nisarv bedam behemo bedam chaya. What if you have blood of a sacrifice that got mixed with the blood of some other animal, some chulin animal, or the blood of a of a chaya, an animal that's not even eligible for the mizbeach? Same thing. You consider it like water because you can't go by the color. The colors are the same. So you evaluate if this much water got into the blood of the sacrifice, would it dilute it too much? Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ein dam mevatel dam. No, blood doesn't. If you're talking about blood that got mixed up with other blood, it can. That's fine. It never gets diluted. Rabbi Yochanan, u'shnei mikra echad darshu. They come from the same pasuk. Um, V'lakach midam hapar midam haseir. The Kohen on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol takes from the blood of the par and the blood of the sair, and you sprinkle them. Hadavar yadua shadam shel par meruba midam shel sair. Now it's that um, the bull has more blood than a goat because it's a bigger animal, but the Torah refers to them equally, as it were. Dama par and dama sair. So Rabbanan Savre. Mikan la'olin she'ein mevatlin zezeh. So the rabbis say, so what you see is that what you imply from that is that the blood of the par and the blood of the sair, they're both kind of equivalent, and one does not dilute the other. Rabbi Yehuda takes the opposite lesson. Mikan l'min b'mino she'eino batel. This tells you that min b'mino does not become nullified, but so.
They say the same thing, don't they?
Yeah, but right. They say the same thing, but it's a little bit different perspective. The rabbis say only in Shein Mevatlin Zezeh. And Rabbi Yehuda takes the more general lesson that min b'mino eno batel, which is something that can be applied in many other areas. So Rabbanan Savre Mikan La'olin Shein Mevatlin says, according to the rabbi's opinion, Vidilma Mishum Damin B'mina. Why do you why would the rabbis say this is specifically having to do with Kachim? That they don't dilute each other. Why don't they take the more general rule like Rabbi Yehuda? Because Yashminan Min B'mina V'Lashminan Olin, if it would tell us about Min B'mina, Kedakamras. Then um, yeah, if it had been a case of just min b'mino, then fine. But here we have another factor, which is hashta. But in this case, dashminon olin, that it's talking about kachim, right? Like, why does it teach you this rule about kachim? It teaches the rule about kachim according to the rabbis because it's kachim, right? And so I don't take if the Torah wanted to tell us a general thing about min b'mino, then it would have told us something about a general non-kachim min b'mino. The fact that it told us about it in the context of the avoda of Yom Kippur means that the rule only applies to kachim, that they don't dilute each other. Um, V'duma dika min b'mino v'olin. So Gemara says, well, maybe you need both then. Like the Rabbanan, like if the Torah is telling you this rule about kachim, um, and maybe it's teaching you both. Like maybe you require both. So if you're going to take that view that why is the Torah telling us about that here, you could go further and say the Torah is telling us about that here only because it needs to be kachim and min b'mino. Um, where's this kasha? Yeah, indeed, that's a good question. Now, what about Rabbi Yochanan? Rabbi Yehuda Savar Mikan. I mean, what about Rabbi Yehuda? Mikan Lamin B'mino Shena Batel. So he does take the general rule of min b'mino in general from here. V'do mishum diolinu. Why don't you say like the rabbis that only apply? The Torah is telling us about the case of kashim, so don't generalize outside that context. Yashmina only min b'sheno mino kedamras. So the Gemara says if the Torah had told you about that, um, if the Torah had told us that the rule of kachim and min she'eno mino that it does dilute, then I would agree. Hasha dashmina min b'mino, but here it's telling us min b'mino eno batel mishum de min b'mino. Who like it's there's a logical thing here, right? That because they're both blood, so it makes sense to say this is why. Um, if the Torah had told us the rule of min b'she'eno mino. Does not dilute, then I would have said specifically here. But since it's telling us a logical thing that min b'mino batel, I'm going to apply that elsewhere. V'doma adika min b'mino ve'olin. The Gemara says again, like maybe you need both. Kasha, yeah, okay. So neither of them have particularly good derivations.
But he says min b'mino ain't bato, right? Isn't that this bottom line?
Yes, yes, it is.
So then so what's the what do we take from there? What's the nafkamina? That the min b'mino that there are still considered two separate items of blood from two separate animals, and therefore we cannot combine them.
Um, no, the opposite. That it's min b'mino. They're both blood, so they don't dilute each other. Now the question
So
is,
they remain separate, though, right?
no, but if they got mixed together, then you can still do this Rika Saddam.
But they don't dilute each other, right? If they
Right.
don't dilute each other, aren't they
If they
still?
got mixed together, they're still considered, they're not, it's not, you don't look at it as if it were diluted. You say that they're both blood. Doesn't matter how much of one got into the other, you can still do the Rika. See, if
But if you said they diluted one, oh, but if they're both blood and one diluted the other, they would still remain both
so
blood.
let me say it this way. Let me say it this way. The idea of dilution does not apply when it's blood with blood, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Or according to both, really, but
Right.
it applies elsewhere. So the idea of dilution doesn't apply. Okay, when it's water or wine, then we have a dilution issue, and we have the measure of how does it still look or would it still look like blood? Then you could still use it as blood on the mizbeach. But in the case of blood mixing with blood, we don't even consider dilution because they're both blood.
But the confusing point for me is
Yeah.
if they were, what difference would it what difference does it make to even say that they could be diluted? Because if they're both blood, and, and you still look at and you bottom line, you look at this plate of liquid and it's blood. You don't know if it came from this or from that. It's blood. So what does it even mean to the concept of dilution here? What would it to say that this would dilute the other one? Because you look at it, it's still blood. I don't even, and with water, okay, you
Well,
can dilute the water of the blood, and now it
okay. What
becomes
about wine?
almost water.
What
Let's
about
say
wine?
with enough water, but or with wine, but
No, but with wine, you wouldn't be able to tell because they're both the same. It's the same color as blood.
here, alakat vakama vakama. If it's blood, it's blood. So what is the concept of dilution by blood?
Exactly. There is none.
So what's
That's
the
what
whole
we're saying.
discussion here? I mean, I don't.
So, well, you could have said, well, since I don't know which is the the par blood has to be sprinkled on the mizbeach, and the sa'ir blood has to be sprinkled on the mizbeach. Maybe it has to be done when it's still like just par blood and just sa'ir blood. So the answer is no. If they got mixed together, it's fine because one doesn't dilute the other. It's all just blood. That's
Right. That's the
right. So
point.
you find that obvious, but the Mishnah did not find that so obvious.
You got a pile, you got a bucket of blood. Can you tell whether this is blood from this
You
animal or
can't.
that animal?
No, you can't. But
Right.
you could have said, if you have a bucket of blood and wine, you can't tell which is the blood and which is the wine. And yet the wine is not something that goes on the mizbeach, right? So then you have to go by the rule of, well, how much wine is in there, right? You could have said the same thing about blood, even though the appearance is still blood. That's the case with wine also. The appearance is still blood. And yet with the wine, we have rules of how much dilution. So, um, so there's a difference between wine and blood, right? Even though the appearance is not different, but with wine, it matters how much wine there was. With blood, it doesn't matter how much of the other animal's blood there was.
But one has to know Merosh, that something else was mixed there. If you're assuming that this color is the same, wine and blood, if you don't know that it's wine there,
Okay,
you look at
fair
it,
enough,
you don't know. So then it's
right?
just red liquid in front of you. And you say, well, okay, I think maybe it could be blood. Unless you examine it and chemically analyze it, you don't know that there's wine in there.
All right, but what if you observe that they got mixed together?
Okay, that's that. So that's what I mean.
I
You have
think
to
that's what we're
know.
talking about. Yeah, I think that's what we're talking about. If you knew that they got mixed together. You don't have to examine every bucket of blood to determine is there something else in here. No, it's only if you observe that something went wrong, then things got mixed together, then you have the question.
Oh, so here with the blood in the blood, one sees that someone spilled blood from this
Yes,
animal and
yes,
animal there.
exactly.
And the question is, well, it's blood is blood, so we can use any blood, basically. Is that true?
That is in the
Let's say
for
it's blood
sure
from a
if it's
pig.
kachim, for sure in our case, yes. According to both Rabban and Rabbi Yehuda, you can still use it.
But let's say it's blood from a pig,
Well, that's
blood
not what
from
we're
a
talking about. We're
horse.
talking
Oh,
about two things that are kachim.
okay, that's okay. So it has to be blood from two animals that are kosher to be on a mizbeah. But if
Yeah.
it's blood and blood, and you don't know what blood, if it's blood from a dog or blood from a, then presumably it would not be acceptable, even though it's blood and blood. But you have to know that it came from the dog and not from the seir.
Right. But then, I mean, I don't know the answer. Like, is blood of a dog worse than wine? I don't know. You could go both ways. You could go either way, right? You could say, well, this is something that's tamei, that's not a kosher animal, and therefore even a little bit would make it puzzle. Whereas wine is, there's nothing wrong with the wine per se. Or you could say that these are both things that don't belong on the mizbeach. So if they're mixed in with the blood, but it's not too much, then maybe it's okay. I don't know. The Gemara doesn't address that.
Uh-huh. All right.
Okay. So now you have a Mishnah, or our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. B'minchas Kohen Mashiach of Minchas Nesachim Psula. If a regular mincha, the comments got mixed in with the, according to Rabbi Yehuda, with the mincha of the Kohen Gadol or the mincha of Nesachim, then that's no good. Shazubli osav, zubli osa raka, vehinbal zumizu, because they have different consistencies. And so the one with the thinner consistency would mess up the one with the thicker consistency because that would all become uniform. Um, V'chibolo zumi zumei and Gemara says, so what? Like min b'minahu. Like we're talking about one mincha mixing with another. So if you want to say that min b'mino is okay, especially on the mizbeach, then what's the problem here? They're both minchas, and they're both oil and flour. Amarava kasav Rabbi Yehuda kol shehu min b'mino v'davar acher. If it's min b'mino, but there's a third factor, there's something else as well. So in other words, you have um, the flour got mixed with the flour, that's fine. But now you introduce the oil thing, then that's a new factor. Salekas mino kamisheno. You remove the v'sheino mino rabo lavu mevatlo. So now it's like now it becomes min b'sheino mino, flour with oil. Okay, so in other words, he still sees it as as a mixture of two distinct elements, and the oil serves to cancel out the what if the flour had just gotten mixed up, fine. But now that you introduce the oil, it's not min bimino anymore.
But isn't the oil part of the kamitza?
Yeah, no, no, it's not. First, you take the comets of the dry flour, and then you mix it with oil.
Right. So then it becomes that's the
Right. So I think what
but then
the
that's
scenario
part.
seems to be the scenario seems to be you take two fistfuls of flour, you mix them together, and then you add the oil.
So then
Although
that's
there,
the Kometz offering, isn't it? I mean, isn't that doesn't that become that's the mincha
and
offering?
that's what you burn. Yeah, that's what you burn on the mizbech.
So that becomes that entity. So that's the couldn't we say that's the mino once you have that the mincha? Or are we talking about before the mincha?
I'm not sure what you mean before or after the
Well, I
mix.
mean, the mincha is the flour with the oil. So what now? So what is what Rabbi Yehuda
Right, we're
talking
talking
about?
about the part of it, the and what do you do with it? You take the comets. Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe it's mixed first and then you take the comets. No, I don't think so.
Uh,
Um,
I thought they mix it. Don't they mix it? The oil and the I not
yeah, when do they mix it?
we did learn this, I think, but I'm not sure I remember this correctly. Now. I thought you mix it with the oil.
Yeah, but at what point? Actually sounds like from the milcha, when did these things get combined after the mixing with the oil? Um, yeah, yeah, I think I stated that poorly. I think you're right. So you take the comets from each one, you mix it with oil, and then they get combined together improperly. So is that a problem? So what we're saying now is that the um, you look at it as a mixture of flour. Let's see. Mm, I'm having a little trouble envisioning where the oil comes from. Like, is there just a big jug of oil that you use to pour it in, or does each mincha get its own oil?
I don't remember that.
Mm, yeah, what if it's just you have like a big jug of temple oil, and you mix that with each of the minchas, and now when each of the comets, and now the two comets mixtures get combined, you have the additional factor of the oil that's in there. Um, so you've got different flours, but the same oil. Um,
Why is
so
there a
you
separate flour? Why do you have two flours?
flour from the two different minchas,
But
right?
why should
That's
that
the
even
mixture we're
happen?
talking about. Well,
Why is
again,
it?
it's just something that shouldn't have happened. Or we're dealing with what if it did happen? It's not something that you should do, but that's what the mission is dealing with. What happens if you mixed up these two excuse me, these two comets oil, these two flour and oil combinations, they got mixed together improperly. Then what do? Right? All of these cases are
But he's taking the
that's
mincha, I mean, to the comets, the flour, and mixing it with the oil, and then at some point he separates the lavona from it, and then he takes this and put it on the mizbeach. We went through these. I to tell you, like, we go through this so fast. I'm not sure which happened when, but 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 the oil here, it seems to be for this mincha is an integral part of the mincha offering. Without the oil, there's no mincha offering. So we're mixing. And so in that sense, if we say that's the offering, then that is the mino. The mino is the oil plus the flour.
right. So that's what we're saying, but that Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that. Rabbi Yehuda would say, no, when you introduce a third factor of the oil, that's a third thing. That's not part of. You don't just see the flour as, or you don't see the two mixtures as what are being mixed together. Rather, you see the flour as what's being mixed together, and the oil is a confounding factor. Then it's not min b'mino anymore. You have three. In other words, maybe a
Yeah.
simpler way to put it is if you have three things, then you can't say min b'mino. So the oil, we don't have a problem with it being mixed from what, mixed up, um, confused one with the other. But the flour, we maybe do. And
So
if
two
we,
people come in at the same time and they bring in their flour and the flour gets mixed up. Normally, isn't this one person in a line? He brings it, another person. I mean, how many people are doing this at the same time? The Kohen, how many people can the Kohen serve at once?
well,
Someone brings
could
in
be
the,
could be multiple Kohanim. I mean, you could imagine that on a busy day, before the holidays, let's say, the it could have been kind of chaotic, right? Like the other day, I was in the supermarket and I accidentally walked off with somebody else's cart. Okay, um, so
they,
it was a busy day in the supermarket. It was a Thursday night in Tina, so these things happen.
yeah, well, I hope you found out
Yeah,
whose
yeah, we
car it
figured
was.
it out. He caught me. He caught me. Okay. Itmar. Komets the minchas chote. Shashimno. If you have the komets of a mincha that's brought as a chatas, and you put the oil in it, so you take the flour, right, the fistful of flour, you mix it with oil. Rabbi Yochanan Omer pasul. It's not supposed to have oil in it. Yeah, minchas chote does not get oil. Um, so what happens if you do put oil in it? Rav Yochanan says no good. Rish Lakish Amar hu atzmo meshachshecho b'shiare halog umaleu. What you can do is um, you take that kometz and take the leftovers of a log shemen from another mincha, um, and that makes it into what? 1 second. What you doing here? How does this help you? Um, Oh, okay. I think Rish Lakish is saying that actually you're not supposed to add oil to the komets of the mincha, but before you, not sure I understood this before. Before you put it on the mizbeach, you're supposed to kind of soak up some oil from another mincha. 1 second. Not sure what Rish Lakish is saying here. Um, Okay. You know what? This is actually Daf Kaf Gimel. I will figure this out for tomorrow. We'll pick it up here
I'm
tomorrow,
not
Craig.
sure. I don't know. I don't understand Rashi. Kolomer techilat mitzvah sheyivshavshenu lekometz b'shirei mincha
Yeah.
echad min alog.
Okay. We're going to deal with this tomorrow, by which time I will have figured it out. They were actually on Daf Kaf Gimel now. So this is tomorrow's stuff. So stay tuned.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.